All right, let's get into it. We're going to be exploring a spiritual movement that's been quietly reshaping how a lot of people in the West think about, well, everything: the divine, gender, and our connection to the world itself. This is the story of the Goddess Reborn. If you've ever read books like The Mists of Avalon or Dan Brown's absolute blockbuster, The Da Vinci Code, you've actually already bumped into the edges of this idea. These books did more than just tell a good story. They introduced millions of us to the concept of a sacred feminine, this powerful divine force that they claimed had been kind of written out of history. But here's what's so interesting. These novels weren't just created in a vacuum. They were tapping into a real-world spiritual current that was already flowing. So this is about way more than just fiction. In fact, researchers are calling this a paradigmatic shift. Now, that's a fancy way of saying it's not just a small tweak, it's a fundamental rewiring of spiritual thinking for a growing number of people. It's a move away from the purely male-centric ideas of God towards something else. So what's really driving this change? Well, at its very heart, this whole movement is a direct response to what its followers see as the major limitations of traditional patriarchal religions. I mean, if you look back, for thousands of years, the major world religions have often been built around a male god, and the interpretations that followed have, historically, tended to place women in a secondary role, or sometimes even a sinful one. The thinkers in this new movement say that this has had a huge impact, not just on society, but on us as individuals. And that leads to this really radical idea from the feminist theologian Mary Daly. She basically argues that patriarchy isn't just a social system, it's the real global religion. And that the traditional faiths we know have often acted like it's supporting apps, reinforcing male dominance as just the way things are supposed to be. This right here, this quote from historian Carol Christ, really gets to the psychological cost of that. She points out that when the ultimate image of the divine is only male, it creates a kind of dependency. A man can see himself reflected in the image of God the Father, but a woman, well, she can't, not fully. Not without sort of denying a core part of her own identity. And that is the spiritual void that this goddess movement is trying to fill. So if that's the why, then what does this new belief system actually look like? It's not as simple as just swapping out a god for a goddess. It's a total rethink of what divinity is. And it's even got its own name. Let me introduce you to theology. We all know theology, the study of God, from the Greek theos. Well, theology is the study of the goddess, from the Greek Thea. It's the name for this whole emerging spiritual framework, and it's all about reflecting on the meaning and symbolism of the divine as feminine. Now, this theology is really built on 4 core ideas that are pretty different from a lot of traditional Western beliefs. So let's break them down, starting with the very nature of the divine itself. Okay, first, and this is a big one, there's a shift from transcendence to immanence. So the traditional view often puts God outside the world, a transcendent creator separate from his creation, kind of like an artist in their painting. But goddess spirituality sees divinity as immanent. It's not up there somewhere, it's right here, in the world, in nature, and inside of us. It's a pantheistic idea where the universe itself is divine. Because this view of divinity is so different, it doesn't really fit into our old boxes like monotheism or polytheism. So a new term has been suggested: polyanonetheism. The idea is that there's one single divine force, but it's fluid. It can be known by many names and seen in many forms. As a goddess, a god, divine pairs, you name it. It's a much more flexible and inclusive way of thinking about the divine. And this beautiful quote from Jean Shinoda Bolen just captures that 4th pillar perfectly, the web of interconnectivity. Because if divinity is immanent, if it's in everything, then that means everything and everyone is connected. It's a core belief that we're not just separate individuals, but we're all part of the sacred, interconnected whole. Now, for a new spirituality to feel real, to feel like it has roots, its followers believe it needs a history. So a huge part of this movement is about looking back into the past and reclaiming a story they believe has been buried or forgotten. And to build that history, they start by asking a really provocative question. What if the patriarchal religions that we're so familiar with aren't the beginning of the story at all? What if they're just a later chapter that overwrote something much, much older? And this slide lays out the story that emerged, popularized in a big way by the archaeologist Maria Gimbutas. The theory goes that ancient Neolithic Europe was home to these peaceful, egalitarian societies that worshipped a great goddess. But then, this era of harmony was shattered by waves of patriarchal, horse-riding invaders from the steppes. These invaders worshipped aggressive male sky gods, and they brought hierarchy and violence with them. And this reclaimed history isn't just some dusty academic idea, it's alive. It directly inspires modern spiritual practices and communities. People are reviving ancient celebrations, like the Beltane Fire Festival you see here, and creating new rituals that are all grounded in this vision of an earth-centered, goddess-worshipping past. So, where does all this lead? I mean, with all this talk about the goddess, you might be thinking, is the goal just to flip the script, to replace an old patriarchy with a new matriarchy? Well, according to the movement's key thinkers, the answer is a definite no. The ultimate aim here isn't about replacing one top-down system with another. It's about restoring a lost harmony. The idea is that both the masculine and the feminine are absolutely essential parts of a whole. They're complementary principles that need to be in balance for us and our planet to be healthy. This quote just sums it all up perfectly. The movement isn't just trying to cosplay an ancient religion. It's about envisioning a new kind of spirituality for the future, one they believe can help create a more balanced, more respectful world. The goddess becomes a symbol for a whole new way of being. So let's just quickly recap the big takeaways. Goddess spirituality is, at its core, a powerful feminist response to traditional religion. It's built on a belief in an interconnected, immanent divinity that's in all of us. It gets its strength from a reclaimed history of a peaceful, goddess-worshipping past. And its goal is both personal empowerment and ultimately a more harmonious future for everyone. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. As more and more people quietly step away from traditional institutions to find meaning on these alternative paths, you have to wonder, are we just seeing a passing cultural trend, or is this the beginning of a deep, fundamental evolution in how we as humans seek the divine?